Hello, Ziyi. Hi, how are you? Okay. I guess we were waiting for a couple more people. I don't know who's going to show up, but I have a number of things to go through. I'm going to record the session, so I have a number of things to go through, and we'll just kind of go through them as if people were here and I was showing them, so they can catch up later. How are you doing today? Preparing for finals. Good. You have any news or anything going on in your world, or how are your projects coming? You had some issues with the simulation of retina. Is it like something that's going to be a fatal flaw in the project, or is it just like some challenges in the design of the simulation? Oh, there's Jesse. Hi, Jesse. Hi. It's a flaw in the design of the fitness function. Okay. Well, that's unfortunate to hear. I don't know if it's. I mean, the fitness functions are hard to get right. You have to do a lot of trial and error on them. I don't know if you got the resources I shared with Stefan this summer. I have some. I don't know if it would be helpful to you, but I have some books and resources that are like sort of keep them for summer of code type things. And if you would like, I could send you some of those materials, kind of a link to the place where they are on Google Drive. Oh, okay, you did get it. So it's it is. It does take a lot of trial and error though in implementing it. Especially, it's like if you have a pre-made package. Those are easier to use, but then sometimes you have problems implementing them on the exact problem you want to implement. So, yeah, it's a little tricky. I wish you luck on that. I don't know. Maybe we can talk about it some other day when you have, if you still have problems, or if you have like someday you'll have some presentation to give on it, and we can talk about it then too. Well, I'm glad that. Okay, yeah, I'm glad that you're at least getting into it, and so yeah, keep me posted on it. See how it goes. Jesse, did you have any news? I know you're not feeling well today, but I just wanted to check in. Oh, we've got two Jessies. Okay. Also, I just got a message from Ankit, and he'll be here in minute or so. He's just having trouble logging in. There he is. Ankit. There you are. Yeah, hi.
Am I audible?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I don't know what's happening. I'm actually at a new place. Am I audible?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, cool.
Okay.
So actually, I came to this place. I talked about like Center for Neuroscience, IISc. Okay.
So you're traveling right now?
Yeah, no, I actually traveled like about 2 days. So I reached here on 4th. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. Are you just visiting there, or what are you up to?
Yeah, it's kind of a short-term internship. They told me, like I approached them and they like about some work, anything that can be done during this time. So they told that they have some programming task related to MATLAB.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. So yeah, so Z is also there, right?
Yeah, he's here.
Cool. Fine.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah. So Jesse. I don't know if he's.
Yes, I'm having a different kind of setup today because I can talk. I might sound a little weird because I have a minor illness, but I want to be able to actually look. I'm basically using my phone as a mic, but I'm having the display on the monitor. So.
Okay. Well, that sounds good. Yeah. So yeah. Well, how's everything coming there? Working on applications to grad school?
Yeah, there's quite a bit. I essentially been gone the entire month of November. So I finished 2 of my. There's going to be different rounds of them because they have different deadlines. But I finished sort of the first 2 major graduate school applications. So that's been a huge deal to do that.
Yeah.
One of them is a PhD program in Washington University. The other is a master's program in Boston. So they're kind of different coasts, but they're both sort of the first. These are the first time that it's been like I applied to one thing last year, but it was just a post-doc program.
Yeah.
That's one of the ones at MIT. And I didn't get in, obviously, but it was like, that was a huge experience for me. But this is the first time that it's like, I don't know, an actual master's or PhD program. So, that was big. And obviously I went to the conference, which, Envision conference, which is very good. I didn't directly I didn't have like a major presentation on the lab per se, but a lot of people learned about the lab. So I was a pretty decent promoter for what it's worth. And I know a few people who may try to join in some capacity in the next year, either through Google Summer of Code or just in general. So I'll talk to you about that more at some point. I don't know. I know how I came into the lab, but I don't know if there are other ways people might come into the lab. So.
Well, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, for doing the promotion in that. So I mean, usually we do Google Summer of Code. I've been trying other methods, but that's usually the main one. So I'll be on the lookout. I'm also promoting in different places when I travel. So, actually, Ziyi asked you a question. Which major are you applying for?
Oh, me?
Yeah. For
Jesse. It's honestly, that's a great question, and it's been why The foundational question for me has been, what major should I apply to? And then the deeper question has been, who's doing the kind of research that I care about personally? Which honestly, the answer is very small. And then if I'm going to go to if I'm going to go to graduate school, I really don't want to go to a school that I can just get into, because I'm basically saying the environment at the university and how they deal with interdisciplinary stuff is huge for me, and it's been very, very, very hard to find what I want to do in a graduate program. So the two things I have applied to right now are one is the Washington University in the Northwest, and they have a very, very comprehensive and integrative, and they call it a neuroscience program. And I would approach that as more of a computer science angle to it. But they have a huge, they have like over 100 faculty in quote unquote the program. So like they're not afraid to say, yeah, we're really interdisciplinary. And I found that very appealing, because a lot of times you find a computer science program that is okay, but they may not have researchers or faculty members that are really doing what you want to do. And like I have a really tremendous friend. His name is Greg Davis. He's in Maryland. And I kind of want to be Greg Davis in the sense that he's a computer science student that has a tremendous ability to focus on what he wants to focus on in his PhD program. But I don't really know. And he does a lot of like really cool sensory motor stuff and things like that. And gets to explore a lot of things related to embodied cognition, because his advisor is very open to that, and they have the resources to do that. Not like necessarily a bunch of funding, but more like the means to do it, in how he cares about training a PhD student, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I mean, I know I'm rambling here a little bit, but so one of them is a quote unquote neuroscience program. But I mean, there's a bunch of neuroscience programs that I'm totally disinterested in, because they're not very integrative. The other one is a master's program, and there's not really a way to compare it. So I'll say I applied to the MIT Media Lab, and if you don't know about the Media Lab, it's super inherently interdisciplinary and kind of avant-garde on some things.
Yeah.
So they're a little quirky, and it's I totally get a Z, and it's as much scouting as you can, and then I feel like the best approach for me has been taking it very slow, because I don't want to go to graduate school just to go to graduate school, and I have a lot of people who their advisors are kind of railroad to them into certain things, and it's like I'm very averse to that. And I'm very fortunate to have found this lab, because I feel like I can have a space to really pursue things. I really appreciate, Brad as a PI, or as someone who I can talk to about a bunch of stuff. I don't know how you guys know this, but in my past research experiences, people can be interdisciplinary, but it's hard to really branch out in certain ways. So, and that's a long-winded answer, but to have a more concise answer, some neuroscience programs, I looked at some cognitive science programs, but I don't want to go to a cognitive science or neuroscience program that doesn't have a decent interdisciplinary or at least computational focus. And then obviously computer science, but a lot of computer science stuff, you have to kind of get lucky with an advisor, or think, all right, what's a good cognitive science lab at the same university, or that I can partner with.
Right. Yeah, I agree, and I had the same problem when I was applying to programs, and I had a pretty rough ride through graduate school. So, but I do agree that like there is a sort of an exercise you have to perform where you have to evaluate programs based on like kind of your own interests. If you're interested in interdisciplinary stuff, they have interdisciplinary programs. Sometimes they have IGERT programs, which are like funded by the NSF, and they're like on particular topics, and they train students. But like in general, like departments or programs, usually you would want to find an interdisciplinary program because if you go to a neuroscience program, some are very biomedical, and some are more like just a couple of topics. So if you really have to investigate the program to really know which one is the best fit for you. Also about PIs, yeah, it is a big problem where you come into a program and you get a PI and they turn out to be like a good fit. And so it's hard, to really gauge that ahead of time. Some programs do what they call rotations, which are you go in and you spend like 6 months in a lab and then 6 months in another lab, and then you get a taste of everything that's going on. But the problem there, of course, is that, you still might not be in a place where you can put together a project. So it's always very hard to get it exactly right. So, but I'm glad I can help you with this in this period of your career. So, yeah, I mean, I'll help you too if you need any help with, figuring out how to, the next steps in applying or whatever. Let me know.
Yeah, and I definitely will do that. It's kind of been tough because I haven't really. I'm getting to the point where you're starting to know me as much as other people, like for recommendations and other experience. So that's kind of been a factor in that. But also, like you more so than anybody else, you easily get what I'm saying here. So that's huge. And I'm gonna absolutely be taking up on that more. And the last thing I would say, kind of for anybody, and this is sort of a generalized and maybe unsolicited advice, but it's just kind of I've realized over the last couple of years that I do like research, and obviously that's kind of obvious at this point that I'm here, but what's kind of become clear is I don't necessarily think I'm going to get into either of the two programs that I applied to right now. But applying to them has been important, and getting to a place where I feel comfortable with my own research agenda, that's been a very big deal. And knowing that regardless if I get into a program or not in the next year or even 2 years or whatever, I feel like continuing to sort of define your own research agenda, I think there's a lot of merit to that, even if it makes it go a bit slower. And that's why having an environment like this has been great for me, because I feel like I can have a place to talk about a lot of different stuff as I do that. But really finding your own stuff, so that way when you're applying, like I think I'll be a much better candidate next year, because I'm going to say, yeah, also I basically decided my own research agenda on my own as much as I can. I've been pursuing that legitimately for a year. Here's what I've been doing. I feel like if I can say that better than what I can say now, I feel like that'll be great for applying, but also that'll be great for like actually what I want to do. So that's something I didn't quite understand a while ago. Put it that way.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you have that experience, you can really kind of just put it in your letter and say, like, this is what I'm doing right now, so I've done, and then, link it to something going on in the program, and it's much easier if they see, like, some concrete stuff.
Yeah, and I think there's something to, like, one of the questions that I got on, like Washington had like 8 different short answer questions. Also, like, if anybody hasn't done it yet or whatever, my experience with applying to graduate school stuff is that there really isn't a lot of uniformity in approach. And especially, at least in the programs that I'm looking at, they tend to be a little more, because they're interdisciplinary, they tend to be even less uniform than other stuff. But one of the questions was basically, do you think you're ready for graduate school? What challenges do you expect? And it's like, it's great to say yes, because I've been thinking about it, and I have friends, and I know a lot of the expectations and the challenges in terms of dealing with PIs and some funding issues, and how to be self-directed in your own research. And I feel good about that, but I feel like there's definitely this. I feel like there's a big difference as you go between, well, here's something that I like doing, here's some projects that kind of fit in with what I want to do, versus, and even looking at like very competitive objective statements or purpose statements, it's, I think there's a difference between tailoring what you want to do based on some experiences and string it together versus actually being able to say in earnest that, yeah, I've spent the last 2 or 3 years working on this problem, so in graduate school, I'm going to extend my work, versus I would like to explore this in graduate school. So,
Right.
Anyway, I think I've learned enough about graduate school. So.
Well, no, that's probably valuable to other people here. Well, thank you for that update, and good luck with the applications.
Yeah, I'll have more in a few months.
Okay, yeah. Ziyi says good luck. Good luck,
Thank you.
Ziyi. So get Stefan here. How are you? Oh, you're muted.
Hello.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm great. It's just some technical issue. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, it's been fine. It's been fine. How are you?
Oh, pretty good. Yeah, we're doing pretty well, I think, here. So how you've been? I guess you've been working on your different projects for the term, and how are those going?
Yeah, that's going well. So I'm still doing my bioinformatics bachelor's, and we have a kind of, well, we call it like practical work. So during this, we do some exercises on some big biological topics like differential expression or read simulation, read mapping as well. And so I've been mostly doing this, but also I worked at the 2 brain hack sessions, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So I can tell you, I wish to tell you about this because it was quite an experience. The first time was in Geneva, Switzerland. So one of the big cities in the French part of Switzerland.
Okay.
And they have a really nice and rich biotech campus there. And yeah, brain hack is, they kind of, it's a kind of very liberal hackathon. I'm actually not clear on who is supporting this hackathon, but I mean, there are no awards or no prizes, no competitions, kind of no industry that you would submit your projects to, or some tracks, like you are used to have with maybe some other hackathons, that there is some company and there is some topic which you have to develop some program to. But in Brain Hack, it's just all really very liberal. So there are some principal investigators come in and they bring their own project. And after this, you can kind of decide which project you are working at. And this year it was 10 project in Geneva hackathon. Well, it was a lot about brain-computer interface. The next most popular topic, I would say, was natural language processing. Yeah, then there was some stuff. Basically, I guess, yeah, most of the projects, some 8 out of 10, were either natural language processing or brain-computer interface, which were 4.5 projects. And our team was doing a project on decoding EEG data. It was kind of really interesting. So the idea is there is 2019 paper on how to decode images from fMRI signal.
Oh, right.
Right, and it's very interesting and very inspiring that we can basically, decode from the signal what the person shows in fMRI, what the person has actually seen.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there is also some Russian attempt of the same year, so this year basically, to decode EEG data.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and they were not really classified, so they were not really decoding the images from the signal. So the goal was not to really reconstruct the whole image as is, but rather to classify this image based on the signal.
Yeah.
And they also did some wavelength transformations. I mean, some ICA. Then they took some Fourier transforms and Fourier decomposition to the primitive waves. So they had a lot of maths there to basically achieve what they wanted to do. But the guy who was working with us, the principal investigator, it was pretty an ambitious goal, I would say, but still it was in his mind to actually try and reconstruct the images that one would see from the EEG data. I would say that, so basically nobody, like the idea was cool, but nobody didn't know what to do and how to begin this. So the practical, where theoretical part was pretty ideal and inspiring, the practical part was lacking. And so we tried various approaches, and I somehow, with my bioinformatics experience, then at the last end, I came to the idea that we could use deep learning for this.
Okay.
So, if we decode the whole EEG signal in like this 128 position vectors for each anode or electrode on the helm, then we would have like a lot of observations. So each track for each patient and for each session was lasting like 650,000 of discrete moments. And we had so even this Russian data, which they used in their study and also made publicly available, they had 13 patients, each 2 sessions. That means 26 sessions in total. And if each session has 600,000 vectors of EEG observations of discrete time moments, it means like pretty a lot of vectors that you have.
Yeah.
And I guess, of course, right, so somebody would have to do some transformation or maybe aggregating these waves or these vectors that we observe in each discrete moment by 3 or maybe, I don't know, by some number. Because maybe this one vector is just too little to understand what's really happening in one's head.
Right.
You have to have some area around it also. But then again, I had this idea. So what I did there was not that much, basically, but still it's on the GitHub now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I've called it Deep Visual for deep learning, and
Do you want to share your screen or?
I will share a link now.
Oh, okay.
So up to the moment, there's just some code written in Julia.
Okay.
With Flux library that would basically allow this all to run relatively fast, even on the personal computer, I hope. So my personal computer didn't bear it, but I also have a laptop, so maybe if you have a stationary PC, that would probably run faster, or run at least somehow. Yeah, and so the idea is to maybe add some transformation for the kind of EEG tracks, for the raw EEG tracks, to still aggregate some moments, like have some aggregation function for some area of moments so that we have some more information than just separate discrete times. And then basically apply a deep learning model on this data. And there, I think in the first place about deep belief networks, because that's what people have been using the most for this kind of function, or this kind of questions.
Yeah.
There's a really good EEG review paper that I've read. They say that for emotional recognition or some stuff in this kind, most studies use deep belief networks.
Okay. Well, this looks really good. And then you have some code in Julia.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Do you like using Julia? Is it a good language to use? Or?
Oh yeah. I would recommend it to everybody. That's basically, it's like, first you can use Unicode symbols in the variable names and the function names, which is pretty good because if you have some complicated mathematical formula, you can just express it with like normal signs, without writing all of this x underscore hat or something.
Yeah.
You can just use x hat because it's Unicode and it will be accepted and it will be shown in code just the way it is. Maybe that not the best, but still very attractive feature. I think one of the most attractive features there is that Julia is really, really a fast language. So it runs, most of the times runs as fast as C at least, and sometimes even faster than the C language, actually.
Yeah.
The problem now, like the one problem that I basically see is that Julia still lacks some big fan base like Python and R do have. Right. But at the same time, it's improving now. So I see a lot of really good packages showing up 2018, 2019. I think it will be continuing in this space. And also, even if you don't have some package that you really, really need it, you can, of course, store it off yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that it's kind of a specialized for scientific computing language.
Yeah.
So it kind of competes with like MATLAB even, and some other more archaic or esoteric scientific computing languages. So I mean, there are a lot of them, but it's always good to have an open option to work with. So.
Yeah, and I think Julia has really some quite nice features to give to the users, and also, I mean, some metrics like speed of the execution, Julia really wins against R and Turing Python.
Yeah, that's good. Well, that's it sounds good. Glad you got a lot out of that brain hack. That was it's always a good experience, I think, to try to do those kind of hackathon type things, and just kind of sit there and try to solve a problem in a very short period of time. I've seen like some of the work on fMRI and extracting images from brain imaging data. I went to a talk a couple years ago on this. There's a guy at Berkeley who does this sort of stuff, and he came to give a talk, and he was showing this, and it was hard to believe that it could be done. It was like you have this, you're basically measuring voxels, which are, not really neurons; they're like cubes of brain matter, and you're measuring hemodynamic activity. So it's not really brain electrical activity. But you do get this in the visual cortex. Of course, a lot of the information is encoded in a way that's easily extractable by pattern recognition approaches. So I guess it's not I guess it's doable. Obviously, people have done it, but it's interesting work. I don't know all the technical details. But,
yeah, so I mean, it's not ideal, of course. So they train an encoder for images first, and then so we kind of have like, you don't really reconstruct image as is actually, but you reconstruct its latent space representation, which you have learned before.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you are basically saying. So it's right. It's all about pattern recognition or some patterns that are there and that we can easily capture from the blood levels, which is basically surprising, but still it's possible apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the second one, by the way, we touched the term of the voxels. So the second hackathon that I went to was just a week after the first one, and it was in Marburg here in Germany.
Okay.
So, I have some friends there. I could stay for free.
Yeah.
That's why I was glad to go, of course. It's like not spending a really big amount of money. I could get there and to take a part. And there it was really a lot about open science, like open science frameworks, maybe some platforms where you can share with others your data or your ideas and then discuss them. There were the most audience was from the cognitive science field. So these were students who were maybe not that familiar with, technical side of things, computational side of things, but rather doing some more abstract or, not really working with computer every day. And so for them, they showed some frameworks, they showed also some tools, and what is out there. I also did get to know a lot new platforms and tools, and we were trying to construct so-called searchlight workflow for the voxel and the surface data. So the basic idea is that you have the voxel data of your brain, right?
Yeah.
It is based on the volume, but the specific about the cortex and the neocortex. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know the terms like this exact. The most correct about. So in neocortex we have the special thing that it is basically folded.
Right.
So you get different results when you compare kind of surface-based geometry, which is based on unfolding this small things there, and when you compare data based on the volume, which is basically unfolded brain, and so you can get some free regions or maybe connecting some two surface regions from very different folds, whereas you have a lot more downstairs, so to say. So it's the cave.
Right.
Yeah, and so we were trying to do this, because I had the understanding of the maybe anatomy or the reason why you would do this. I didn't really manage to do it in such a short time, but I read pretty a lot about that, and I must say, what really surprised me is how technically advanced the neuroinformatics community actually is. Because I'm going to send you a link, which I would really like you to look at, because it's just amazing. I mean, you don't have something like this in bioinformatics.
BrainLife.io.
Exactly. And so what they do at this platform is that you first can upload your beats data set. I mean, you have to get it structured somehow, according to the standards, which also makes sense.
Right.
And after you've uploaded it, you can just run some so-called beats apps just straight from the GitHub.
Okay. Yeah.
Using this platform, and not even using your you're not even using your computational power. You're using somehow this, I guess, Stili Lab computational power or something.
Oh yeah, so you can create a project, upload your data, and analyze it online. Okay.
Exactly. And you have some open source apps to choose, and we were basically going to submit, if I maybe somehow next year or during some free time, I would finish this app, the idea of which we have, then we could also just upload it first to GitHub and then say to the Brain Live guys, hey, we have their app, which we could really add on your platform, and people would use it to analyze their cortical data.
Yeah, that looks very good. It's very useful. Yeah, like in neuroscience and in psychology, they've been doing things that are sort of reproducible science. So there's a real emphasis. And strangely enough, in bioinformatics, there hasn't been as much of a push for that. You'd think that there would be because, you're doing analysis. That's what the whole field is like, analysis. And so reproducibility is pretty important. So, I mean, that's another topic that if people are interested, we can talk about more, because I've been interested in reproducibility for a while, and I do some work in it, sort of, other than like the projects that I'm running here. So this is really good though. This sort of infrastructure to have this in place. I work with eLife Publishing on some areas of reproducibility, and they have a series of tools as well. eLife is a journal for life sciences, but they also have they have a very strong interest in reproducibility and things like that. So this looks really good. We'll have to take a look at this more later. Thanks for the update.
Sure.
Okay, so for the last 15 minutes, I'd like to talk about, actually, I wanted to talk about the NeurIPS conference, and I know a lot of you know that conference. It's coming up this next week in Canada, in Vancouver. So I'm going to show some, let's go through some of the stuff that they've got online. And you can look at this later. I'm going to share my, and then we'll talk about the manuscript after that. So I just wanted to go through this quickly to make people aware of what's going on. So NeurIPS, of course, this used to be the NeurIPS conference, which is a very old conference. It was started in the 90s, and they were interested in simulating the brain. And so, but this has become more of a machine learning conference over time. So, as machine learning and deep learning have arisen, it's become more dominated by that. So, this is the website here, the conference, sort of the proceeding for the conference, the schedule and so forth. I'm going to share a link here. So this is for this year's conference. There it is. And then, so they have a lot of different tracks. It's easy to get overwhelmed by it when you go to a conference and you look at the schedule. There are a lot of parallel tracks. There's a lot going on. So, if you go to a conference, it's best to get this in advance and go through and see what you want to attend. But since you're not attending it, I don't think anyone's attending it here. You can just look through the stuff that they have here. So they have they have their tutorials, the main meeting. So the main meeting, let's say Monday, they'll have a series of talks. And, I'd encourage you to explore this area, this link, and look at the schedule and see kind of the titles that people are presenting on. So, there's some sessions here on machine learning for computational biology and health, or, interpretable comparison of distribution and models. And, they're just all these different topics that people are working on. And this is sort of represents, sort of the cutting edge of the field. So if you want to get a sense of people are working on, this is a good way to get to see without really going to the conference, what's going on in the field. There are a couple of workshops, though, I also wanted to show, and I've gotten these links in my personal communications. The first one is it's a workshop, and of course, those of you who haven't gone to a conference before, when you go to a big conference like this, and this isn't like as big as like Society for Neuroscience, but it's a major conference. They'll often have workshops at the beginning of the conference, and the workshops are actually put on by people. They propose the workshops, and then they get accepted, and then they have to organize it as sort of a parallel mini conference. So this one here, and I want to put the link in the Windows Skills Workshop. So one area of machine learning that's sort of up and coming is this idea of transferable skills or transferable learning. So what that means is that, and this is actually from human behavior, is where this sort of idea arose, is where if you train someone, say, on how to fly a plane using a flight simulator, and they practice flying a plane on a flight simulator, you should, in theory, be able to use that simulator to train them to fly the real plane. That's a theory. That's the theory that we have of that, and it works because we have flight simulators and they're effective. But there are other cases, there are other domains where maybe it doesn't work as well. Like, for example, can you learn basketball by watching a basketball game? Can you learn how to actually play basketball? And so maybe that's a little bit less successful. You have a simulation, which is watching basketball on television, and then you watch, all the rules, how people pass the ball and shoot, things like that. But then when you go to play the game, it's quite different. And so the idea here is that there's something going on in the brain where you can train yourself on one domain and transfer the skills to another domain. And so that's what this is about. And so this workshop is just, a series of papers that people present on this topic. And they're doing it in AI. So this is now, you're talking about this transferable learning, but doing it in a simulation or doing it as a artificial sort of program. And so they're doing this in robots. They're doing this in, they're looking at different topics like credit assignment and other skill, skill embeddings. I'm just like kind of going through the titles here, but I just wanted to bring your attention to that. Then they have links to the papers so you can read on that, a bit on that. I'd encourage you to look through some of the papers just to get a sense of what's going on. So that's one workshop. Another workshop that looked interesting was this Retrospectives Workshop. And this is, I think this is really interesting. This is a workshop that is based on sort of reflecting on like what's going on in the field of machine learning and deep learning and all this. It's a very fast-moving field. So, you have all these new developments like almost monthly on different topics. And so it's good to reflect on what's been going on in maybe the past 20 years in AI and in machine learning and in other types of allied areas. So they have a couple of speakers here. Melanie Mitchell, of course, is from Santa Fe Institute. She's been a long time proponent of AI and complex systems. You have a number of people here who do different things in this area. And so there, again, this is another workshop where you have papers that that people published. You can look through the papers. So let's see. What is a retrospective? A retrospective is written about a single paper by that paper's author and takes the form of an informal blog post. The purpose of a retrospective is to answer the question, what should the readers of this paper know now that is not in the original publication? So you're reflecting on your own paper, but you're also reflecting on it's like this style of this too. It's very different from what usually happens at a conference where you get these 10 and 15 minute like brain dumps, and then you have to like if you have a complex piece of work, like if you have a paper that's very complicated and you get a 15-minute talk, it's very hard to communicate the idea. You really have to just rush through it. So I like this kind of format. And I put a link to that in the chat as well. So I hope you check those out. And I know you're not going to NeurIPS, but you can get a little taste of what's going on there. So now, in the last 10 or 15 minutes, I'd like to go on to the paper. So I know that Stefan is here, so I'd like to actually go over the paper as it stands right now and get his input on this. So let's see, can I share my screen? Okay. I'm going to reshare my screen. Okay, so Stefan hasn't seen it in a while, so it's going to look a little bit more developed than he remembers, maybe.
Mm.
So I have to still figure out the authorship. I'm working on order. We can decide on that later. I might end up being last author for reasons that are, sort of organizational. We have a proposed title, which is can be negotiated if you're interested in a different title. Propose something as a comment. I think this is pretty clear, though. So we have an abstract, of course, and that just kind of describes the paper. I put a note here: be more specific about the approaches. So probably add maybe a sentence or two on the approaches and a little bit more detail. But the abstract needs to be pretty brief. Then there's an introduction now, which takes the form of just a very basic introduction to the idea that we're trying to communicate here, the motivation for the work, and I need to add some more into that. If you want to add into that, please feel free. Then basically justification for the approach, some things on neurodevelopment in general, like in the biology, some things about neurodevelopment and brain networks. So we move to network representation, and then development and connectionism, which is an interesting relationship. And I think I talked about this with Ziyi. I don't know if other people remember this, but there's some work that was done like maybe 25 years ago on developmental connectionism, which is where you have a connectionist network, like a deep learning network or a neural network, but they had a developmental approach to it. And it didn't really go very far. There were a couple papers on it. But I thought I'd bring it up in terms of some background for this work. And so, so I mean, I have this in here. And of course, Jesse, we've talked about the embodied cognition contribution. So this is something, again, like I think we talked about before. This is something that is best done by like kind of not just writing, but like walking through like what about embodied cognition is relevant. Because if you get into the literature, it's very deep in terms of terms and what people are trying to get at. But it's, I would like to focus it to this specific set of pieces of software and what we're talking about in here. I think, a good organizational scheme is to just kind of read through this paper, and think about embodied cognition very generally and say, what kinds of ideas can we bring to bear? Maybe 2 or 3 ideas from the literature. And then, write a little section on that and say, this idea is relevant, this idea is relevant. Like we talked about with Brainberg vehicles, the fact that it's in a body, that there is a body and a brain is important. So a lot of these notes are about embodiment. And so we can talk about that more. If you want to just kind of run an outline by me, that's good too. I want to be flexible in getting you to write, because it's hard to really kind of get inspiration to write. It's not easy to, crunch through literature and kind of find the right thing. So we should definitely, whatever style you're comfortable with, we should definitely do it that way. So we have generalized models of regulation, which is sort of moving on towards how things are regulated. Then we talk about feedback, emergence, and then that again is something that Ankit is interested in. If he has anything to add to that, please propose it. And I moved some of this down into the discussion, so that's why it looks a little bit different. Then we have some methods, and this is the thing I wanted to bring to Stefan's attention. So I have two things that I need you to contribute. I need methods for your project, and I don't know how much different it needs to be from what you wrote up for Summer of Code. It might be a little bit different, but just basically, so it needs to be like a description of how the methods that you use. So like with Ziyi, he's contributed a number of equations that describe some of the functions that he's used in his. That equation isn't very good, number 2, but I have to work on that. But anyways, it's like, it's a series of equations with descriptions and different concepts. So that might be something that you could do, or it could just be basically what you wrote up for your Summer of Code project. What do you think is easier to do or more suitable?
I would think, looking at these parts, I think it would be most homogeneous if I would just insert my technical description of the project.
Okay, yeah, that's good. We'll make a note here.
All right.
Is that something that's available like in the repo, or is that something that you need to put together?
Well, I guess it's available in repo, but still I could look into it, maybe, change some places, 1 or 2.
Okay. Yeah.
Before proceed.
Yeah. Well, we can do talk about that offline. I mean, I can look and see what's in there. And then if I think I need something, I can let you know. That might work too. Because I mean, it's I don't want you to do a lot more work than you've already done on that. I just if there's something I think needs to be updated, maybe I'll ask you. So Jesse says, yeah, I have not significantly looked or touched at the paper. Yeah, I've not really done a lot with it either, but I mean, I know it's hard. We have a lot of other things, but it's like, so I hope to get back to this, and I keep saying that, but it's like, I'm not putting the time I want to put into this, so, but I think it's coming along actually. So Ziyi's put in like some technical details for that. Now, in Ankit, of course, we have, do you have any, what you might want to put in there?
Yeah, so like I just came here and settled down. I felt like I could add my part now, but I didn't get time this week. So hopefully this next week or in the weekends, I'll have some time to put my part. So today itself, I was like reading the paper that we have written, and like how do I fit into that? So I need to think a bit, and then maybe I would write it by next week again.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah. I just wanted to keep tabs on the contributions. Then the results. So then we have the methods. Now we have the results. So then this is this front part here is just kind of a general description of what we're gonna present. And then of course we're presenting the 3 software instantiations. So again, this is for Stefan, Rajan Brain, which is this again, is this something, do you think that the repo is sufficient? Can I just take from the repo and then ask if you want to update certain things, or?
It actually is not, I would say. So there is the technical description of the process, like of the program. I mean, I would need to add some more background on this, I think, or some saying.
All right.
Yeah, but there's the technical description of the program.
Yeah.
And I think we would need some maybe 1 or 2 equations more showing the actual process behind this, okay. Right? So the world, like the physics of the world, for instance, the physics of the world that I'm kind of introducing, or representation, binary representation, the way I represent networks of the node size as a binary string that I then mutate. I anyways, I would try and do this like in the nearest future now. Do we have some deadline that we are kind of?
Well, I've been kind of focused on doing it by the end of the calendar year, but I don't know if that's like too short because we're already in December. So I mean, I don't want to like make you do anything like in a week. But I mean, like if you want to, what's a good deadline for you? I guess. What would be a good deadline for you? I mean, what is your schedule like in the next month or so?
Yeah, so I mean, if we would do it in the next month, that probably is going to be all right.
Okay, yeah. So it's
do we have some journal that we apply to? Do we already know?
Well, I've been thinking about the Journal of Open Source Software, but I don't know. I just actually found an article that shows like a bunch of candidate journals for like open source projects, and I'll share that on Slack or by email. It looks, I don't know, there are a bunch of potential journals that they have on the list, so I'll have to go through it. It's really a matter of like once we get it done, actually just kind of seeing maybe thinking about where it might fit, and then like maybe sending out some inquiries. You can actually send out pre-submission inquiries to certain journals and ask them, is this something that's a fit for your journal? And it just saves you a lot of time in terms of reviewing. And then they'll say, it's not, or it is. And so, that's probably a good way to do it. But we have to get it done first, and then once it's finished, we can sort of evaluate which journal to try. And I would try like 2 or 3 so that if one gets rejected at one, we can go to another. And that's a good strategy. Yeah, so that's the idea. So we need like in this area, of course, this results, not really results. It's just like, so Ziyi's written up some things where he's just kind of demonstrated the world in figures. So like you have figures that show like the instantiation of the thing. They're not really methods, but they're sort of like, this is how the program works. And then, it isn't really an experiment. It's just kind of like, this is how it works. Here's some screenshots of the world. That might be good for this section. This is the example of a real-time animation. So you go through some of the attributes of the animation and how it might be used. So that's the idea here and how to write this part up. And then Ziyi is written this part. So Stefan, I need some materials from you, and then of course Ankit, I also need materials from you on this. And I think we discussed that. It's I mean, the more figures you can provide, that's a good way to work. If you can come up with a couple figures and then write around that and say, this is what's going on in my simulation. And then the discussion and future plans. So we have a discussion, and then we have the use cases. So Ziyi provided a use case. We might include the use case that Stefan mentioned at the INCF conference, which was the TSP and spatial cognition use case. And then maybe a use case from Ankit's work. And just, again, I think we've talked about use cases. It's just a description of how you might implement the software. And then that's pretty much it. There's some follow-up on some of the concepts, but that's an open area. So once we get these technical parts in, I think we'll be pretty much almost done, and then you can just finish off the manuscript, and then we'll be ready to submit it. So we'll probably do a preprint first, and then we'll submit it to journals, and we'll promote the preprint, and see how people receive it, and then that also gives us opportunities to get people's attention. Like I've had papers where I've had the preprint out, and an editor of a journal asked if I would submit it to their journal. So that's another way to do it too. But I think it looks pretty good. I think it'll be a pretty good paper. Hopefully people like get really excited. So we're a little bit past the top of the hour, and so thanks for attending. And next week we'll probably talk a little bit maybe about more about the paper, but also the Google Summer of Code for 2020. I'm working on some writing up a description of the projects. I know Jesse said he might have some friends who are interested in applying, but I'd like to get everyone's feedback on sort of what would be a good way to maybe a second version of this project, or something a little bit different for this coming year. So I just like to see what people have in terms of input. So that's it. Anyone have anything else they'd like to add?
It's fine on me.
All right. Well, thanks for
attending. There's stuff I'll say next week, but that's all for now. There's an interesting complex New England Complex Systems is having a winter course that I may be going to. I'll say more about that next week.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks for attending, and have a good week. If you need to contact me, email or Slack. Have a good week.
Thanks.